Hey there, this is Eric Keller for ZBrush Jewelry Workshop, and this is the video for the October 2022 ZBrush Jewelry Workshop Monthly Challenge. So this month, the challenge is to explore MicroPoly, and we're also going to take a look at MicroMesh, because I want to explain the difference between the two, where you find the buttons to use the two different tools, and which one is better, because one is definitely better than the other. So let's start with MicroMesh, which has been part of ZBrush for a while, and I think is the lesser of the two. It's still built into ZBrush. It works pretty well, but there's a couple things you have to do in order to get it to work correctly. First thing we need to do is let's choose a base geometry. So I'm going to click on the gear and get a polycube. So if I turn on our wireframe, you can see we have 98 points, so it's a very light cube. So what MicroMesh does is it's going to replace each one of these polygons with a piece of geometry of our choice. So we want to go in the tool palette, down to geometry. Let's scroll down, find MicroMesh. I'm going to click on this. It's going to open up our little tool palette. Let's choose like the polymesh star. You can see that this is on. Not much has changed though. We just see a little hint of geometry there on the plane. It's like a little preview. In order to see the actual polygon replacement that MicroMesh does, we need to go into the render palette and down here, turn on draw MicroMesh. And what this means is that when I hit BPR to do a render, we can see each one of our polygons has been replaced by that chosen tool. So if I go in here, let's choose a different one. Let's say that's the Arrow 3D. Then I hit BPR, and there we go. So if we subdivide the model, right, and render again, then we get more arrows. And let's say we want to actually turn this into geometry. So I'll do BPR. And what I want to do is go into the tool palette. So I'm in the tool palette, scroll down here, convert BPR to geo, and then we have basically our array of arrows there. So I mean, it's a cool way to get some geometry on there, but using BPR to preview it is kind of cumbersome, in my opinion, and not as flexible as the other alternative, which is MicroPoly. So let's take a look at MicroPoly. So MicroPoly does the same basic thing. It replaces all of the polygons in a base mesh with the geometry of your choice so that you can have these nice repeating patterns. The nice thing about MicroPoly is that unlike MicroMesh, MicroPoly doesn't require you to render using BPR. It has many more options and is a bit more flexible, so I like it better. So let's go to a polymesh star, and I'm going to press W, and let's choose that same poly cube. So we have our cube here at 98 points, and I want to go into the tool palette, and I'm going to go into geometry, and I want to go down to dynamic subdivision. So expand this little sub palette here, turn on dynamic subdivision. So as you probably know, dynamic subdivision allows you to see a preview of what your model would look like if you subdivided it without actually subdividing it. So still 98 points, but now we have this little preview thing, and I can do things like change the number of smooth subdivisions to get a preview. It's not very impressive on a cube, but you get the idea. Let's leave it at one smooth subdivision. And then there are a bunch of other options. We don't really care about that right now. This is more about these options down here, MicroPoly. So if I click on MicroPoly on, it turns it on. We also get this browser where we can find a whole bunch of presets that have been made by the kind folks at Pixelogic. So if I choose one of these, like the chain length, then it replaces all of the polygons in my original surface with the chosen geometry. And I can swap that out by clicking on this and choosing another one. And you can see the geometry has been designed in such a way so that each of the borders line up perfectly, creating a repeating pattern, which is pretty cool. So if you want to use your own geometry, all you need to do is, instead of just clicking on this little window here, hold the control key, click on the window, and then you'll get our geometry picker. So I'm going to use this simplified scorpion model as an example, and you can see that it's looking kind of odd. So that's where these options come in. So if I'm going to scale this down to say 0.1, and let's align it. Let's turn off fit. That's probably the problem. There we go. Now it's looking better. So you can see I have my little heart scorpion. So each one of these is 150,000 points. These are instances, so it's just a preview, so it's not actual geometry yet. But just keep in mind that if you use a heavy model like this, it is going to slow things down, especially when you convert it to geometry. So for that reason, it's usually a good idea to use a lower polygon geometry. But regardless, you can use the rotate buttons to kind of rotate this around and see if you can get it to align in the way that you want. Let's try some different base geometry. So I'm just going to turn off MicroPoly, and let's go in here and let's choose a ring instead of a cube. And then we can go and turn on MicroPoly again, and look, now we have this. So you can see with the hover geometry, sometimes it kind of goes up to a certain limit and then stops. So for that reason, you either want to use a low resolution base mesh or a lower resolution MicroPoly. So if we switch back to, say this one right here, and then I'm going to turn on fit, and play with rotation. Lots of fun options there. So the other cool thing about this is I can sculpt that base geometry, in other words, this geometry, while MicroPoly is on, which allows me to get a really good idea of what this might look like once I convert it to its final geometry. So it's still going to be using instances, and I'm going to just pull up the move brush here, and you can see as I pull on this, it looks like I'm pulling on that chain mesh, but I'm actually modeling this right here. So let's go back a few steps and then do something even more interesting. We could say go in here and, well, I don't know, use a deformer, like a twist deformer or something. Twist that sucker around, that's kind of cool. And then we can just apply it and go back into draw mode and maybe turn on symmetry, local symmetry, and let's do it on Z-axis. There we go. So, super fun, right? You can smooth, you can inflate, and all that kind of good stuff. And okay, that's a horrible mess. So let's just go back to this right here. And let's say I want to convert that into geometry. Go down to dynamic subdivision, MicroPoly is on, and hit apply. Now this is actually the geometry, so you can see now it's 47,000 points. That's not too bad. I could go down here to deformation and maybe try like inflating, subdivide, and have at it. So the challenge for October 2022, make something using MicroPoly. Pretty straightforward, right? Okay, so for members of ZBrush Jewelry Workshop, I will be creating a more in-depth look at MicroPoly and MicroMesh for our ZBrush Fundamentals section. So if you're not a member of ZBrush Jewelry Workshop, go check out ZBrushJewelryWorkshop.com and explore the site. You'll see we have a nice community we're building up there. Membership includes a lot of fantastic resources created by myself and Tomas Wittelsbach and the other artists over at ZBrush Jewelry Workshop. So, and also, of course, keep checking out our YouTube channel for more videos, and like and subscribe as always. Thanks very much. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys do with MicroPoly. I think you'll find it's a lot of fun and has many applications for the kind of work that we're doing. So look forward to seeing that, and I also look forward to seeing you next month. Thanks very much.